Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Testing, testing. Welcome, welcome, everyone. It's great to be here again and to have you here. If you can hear me, let me know in the comments. I always like to do a very quick audio check, make sure I'm not speaking to myself. So if you can hear me okay, just give me a thumbs up or a yes, you can hear me. Awesome. See people joining in. Hi, Thomas. Thomas is a digital learning network. Okay, Chicago. Awesome. Joseph from Dallas. Fatai, hello. I'm auto. Okay, great. Rotimi here from Lagos. Great. Let's keep the introductions going in the comments. It's nice to see who's here and where you're joining from. I'm Kelechi. I'm the Chief Community and Marketing Officer at Itana. I'm joining from very sunny and very hot Abuja, but it's great to be here and to have you here. So please let us know you and where you're joining us from in the comments. So today's webinar is really, really special. As you know, we periodically host these to guide you on entering and scaling the African market, help you get an edge, help you position yourself better. There are so many foundational things that people don't know, and it ends up tripping them as they begin to scale. So this is to guide you and to make sure that you're not going in blind. Today, we'll be discussing from Delaware to Africa, evaluating the options for your business jurisdiction. And I'm sure there are people here who haven't thought about where their business is domiciled. Well, today is the day for you to actually think about it. It's getting even more important as things in the world is evolving. So this is a really, really important session. And we saw great interest, people sending in questions and people just resharing it because they thought the topic was very important. This series is brought to you by Itana, Africa's first special economic zone for digital and service-based companies. Itana is the ideal jurisdiction for businesses seeking an enabling environment to scale. And you can begin your business registration today by going to app.itana.africa. Today's session is in partnership with one of the most reputable law firms in Africa, and I'm so excited. We are partnering with Udoma and Bello-Osagie. You know, it's a very serious law firm when they have very long names in their name, right? And today we have three incredible speakers who are experts on this matter. Normally, you would need to pay top dollar to listen to them, but today we've brought them to you. So I'm hoping that you are going to make the most of this session, ask your questions. Really, the more questions you ask, the more insights you're able to get. So feel free to get interactive in the comments and drop your questions. So we have two senior associates at Udoma and Belo-Osagie with us, Anu Odenike and Kelechi Ibe. Where are they? There they are. Hello, guys. Lovely to see you. And we have the Director of Business and Compliance at Itana, Adetayo Oduwole. It's great to have you guys here. Hi, guys.
Hi Nkechi, hi Anu Dunaike and Kelechi Bay. Hi guys.
Hey everyone again.
Hello. Are you guys
Hello.
excited for today's session?
Yes, yeah.
I know everyone was pumped. We were talking earlier, and everyone was just pumped and excited for this session. Let's see what we have in the comments before we get into it. Oh, I can see someone else dialing in from Abuja. And there's Vivian from the legal department. So we have lawyers here. Vivian's a lawyer, so she's ready with her questions. We have Ibukun. Hi, Ibukun. How are you doing? She's at the Netherlands. It's great to have you. She's one of our digital residents. It's always great to see friendly faces and names. So this is supposed to be an interactive session. So we want you to send in your questions and your comments. In the comments, put it in the chat. We're going to be taking it and our experts will be answering the questions that you have on the topic. So please, engage. But before we dive into it, I always like to ask a light question. And I want everyone that is watching to participate and also let me know your response to this question in the comments. So this is the question. If you could live in any city in the world, but not the one you currently live in, which would it be and why? So, Anu, let me know your answer, and then Kelechi and Tayo. But everyone else, please put it in the comments. I'm very curious to know.
Okay, so I would say New York just because, and I think it's nostalgia because it gives very much Lagos vibes. So I'm not big on change. So that's like the closest city. So
Mhm.
I would say New York just because there's like energy, the buzz, and there's just people, like the people, and then the food as well. It's quite good. So I would say New York.
New York is nice, like Lagos Annex. Kelechi, what
Yeah.
about you?
Like that.
Kelechi?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I was trying to unmute. Yeah. I've been thinking about the response. I think I'd like to live in Kigali.
Kigali,
One.
Rwanda.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have a very. I think it's just the fact that I hear it's a very. I haven't been there before, but I hear it's a very clean, um,
Yes.
quiet, nice city. And the people there are really interesting people. So I think I'd like to live in Kigali and Rwanda.
That's nice. You see, Kelechi doesn't like stress. Anu wants all the stress. She wants all of it. Okay, Tayo, where would you choose?
I'll just stay in Lagos
Except Lagos.
anytime.
That's the question. The question is except the city you're in now.
Oh, except the city I'm in now. Okay,
Yeah.
definitely not Abuja.
Uh-uh.
Uh,
See beef.
definitely not Abuja. Let me see.
We don't want to
Well,
hear
I
that.
just got back from Marrakesh and it's quite a nice place. I like the
It's
weather
lovely.
and all that. So yeah, maybe I'll choose Marrakesh again sometime,
It's
anytime. Yeah.
it's lovely. It really is. I would choose Nairobi. Nairobi is really really serene and quiet, and I would definitely choose not Lagos since you're throwing punches. Let's see. In the comments, I'm seeing Madrid. Oh, nice. Singapore. Singapore is lovely. New York is overly stressful. You see, Peter does not even like. He says no suffering for him. Dubai is really nice. It's hot like Abuja, so feel right at home. And Singapore, Doha is nice as well. Oh, amazing! It's like everyone wants to go to Singapore. I need to visit there. But awesome! Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to dive right into the session right now. There are some questions that people had sent in earlier. So I'm going to take some of them. And whilst we're taking them, please join in and leave your comments and questions as well. And then we'll be taking those. So there's a question here, and I think Kelechi will be the best person to answer it. The question is, why have so many African startups, even the unicorns, historically chosen Delaware as their preferred jurisdiction? What are the core benefits that have made it so attractive?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ikechi. Okay, so I think as a general comment, I think the the main benefit that the Delaware entity or corporation confers is really the Delaware advantage. So there's something called the Delaware advantage, which is that it's a familiar jurisdiction for startup businesses. Investors are very familiar with the jurisdiction. They're familiar with the rules, corporate rules, and all of that. And if you're looking to raise money, which is usually what most startups, particularly African startups, hope to do, you would have to go to Delaware for the most part because the investors who are willing to write you checks, oftentimes would insist you register in Delaware, you incorporate in Delaware because that's where they're familiar with. I think that's like the very key distinctive feature. And the reason why I say so is because when you look at the other advantages of incorporating in Delaware, it applies in most other jurisdictions, like in Nigeria, for instance. So one of the things you would hear people say is that it allows you in a Delaware corporation, like a C corp, which is like the most popular structure for startups. They'll tell you things like you can have different classes of shares, different classes of stock. In Nigeria today, you can actually do the same thing. You can have preferred shares and have ordinary shares. So it's not really like a distinctive benefit that only Delaware confers. You see, they'll tell you things like there's limitation of liability for the managers of a company, where if a company is mismanaged, there are rules that prevent the managers or the officers of the company or the founders from taking personal liability, which is really the same thing. I mean, if there's no fraud or the willful negligence under Nigerian law, for instance. You cannot hold a founder or a director or a manager in a company responsible for the company's where the company maybe doesn't succeed. Let me use the simple term. So you see, it's not really a benefit peculiar to Delaware. I guess what I really see from my research and from reading the various legislations is just that there is that familiarity that foreign investors have with Delaware. And when you think about it, it makes sense because most of the funds that African startups raise is in form of venture capital funding, and VCs want to exit the investment. They want to be able to either an IPO, an exit, or maybe sometimes they do secondaries, which is not very it's not common in African investments where they can sell their stake in a portfolio company to another VC company. But ultimately, they want to exit, and unfortunately, the African capital markets environment doesn't really promote IPOs for startups. You have to be like a really big company to be able to list on the stock exchange for exit. So, but for Delaware companies, there's that presumption that if you're a US-based entity, it's easy to get to IPO, and investors are more willing to write you checks because they can see a path to exit more easily than they could if you were to be an African incorporated entity. And so that's why I think most people tend to go to Delaware. Happy to hear the thoughts from my other colleagues.
Agreed. I think that's a very big point. And that Ray Lex, who left something in the comment, he said also for Delaware, there are 100 years of corporate laws and stable ruling. And I guess that's what makes it people familiar with it, and access to US investors. I know in the beginning, like when this whole startup ecosystem was just still in its infancy, African startups were required to register in Delaware before a US investor would even write them a check. And I know things are now shifting, but then it was like, this is the requirement. I'm not giving you my money if you don't do this. But I am quite interested, like it's interesting to see how things are shifting. So now, Anu, with this recent shift in the US regulation or global policy environment, should founders be paying attention to what should founders be paying attention to? Like looking at all the shifts that are happening right now, what should founders be paying attention to, especially for those that are domiciled in Delaware?
Okay, thanks. Great. So, I mean, founders have to be very aware of certain changes as to Delaware law and also respect to shareholder rights, because a recent law was passed last month, which kind of curtails shareholder rights and how they can then issue matters or litigations against founders or investors in the company or larger shareholders when they make decisions that seem like a conflict of interest. For instance, some of us may have heard about the Tesla compensation package issue and how it was thrown out. So it seems like Delaware is taking a step to protect the big names, like the larger investors, leaving minority shareholders, which sometimes would include founders, because depending on how much funding you want, right, you will need to give up some level of control. So if you've continued to give up levels of control and you're now in the minority, if your larger investor wants to take certain actions, then you're now prevented from suing them and taking them to court over those issues. So it's something that founders need to be very aware of. If you still have control of your company, which I would doubt, because once you want money to come in, right, investors will continue to take control because that's what they want, right? Because so they can easily exit, like Kelechi said. So it's something that founders need to be very aware of. And also, we all know the recent tariffs that have been passed by the Trump administration that would also affect like trade and exports. So if your business is focused on exports and imports, etc., then those tariffs, which are quite high, I think for Nigeria is 14%, South Africa, steel and aluminium is about 25%, and for like the garment and the clothes industry was about 50%. So the tariffs are quite high. It's something that founders have to be aware of, and also regulatory compliance obligations, your tax reporting is it's very important that if you are taking the decision or taking the step to set up in Delaware, then you're fully abreast or fully aware of all of the various nuances that comes with running a C corporation. You're not just setting up a Delaware corporation just to set up like other unicorns, because they've put in the work, right? They have lawyers, they have tax consultants. It's not something you just go into blindly. There's so many compliance obligations and penalties that can be applicable if you don't do things the right way. I'm definitely go into that in more detail in subsequent questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know lots of founders don't do enough research. They just like you said, they see that the unicorns are there. Lots of the companies they've heard of are domiciled, and they just go ahead. But you don't know the level of backing and what they have in their arsenal to fight the battles that they are fighting,
So,
right? And
mhm,
things are changing. Things are changing a lot. So
rapidly.
yes, yes. So and people are beginning to adjust to those changes because what seemed very attractive in the past, in comparison to the way even the local system has evolved, doesn't look as attractive as it used to be. I think there are a few comments here as well. There's another Kelechi here, Kelechi in Jaka. He said that considering the enactment of secure transaction in movable assets, Act in 2017. I'm just guessing this person's a lawyer for sure. In Nigeria, and its essential provisions that make it easier for startups to access credit facilities, is not safe to say that startup companies can. Isn't it safe to say that startup companies can easily thrive in Nigeria? So he's talking about some of the changes in policy that has made even the Nigerian ecosystem a little bit more favorable. And I think that's a good question to double click on, right? What are some of the ways the local environment has actually evolved that has become a bit more enabling for startups? Tayo, do you want to take that question?
Thank you. So, over the years, we've seen the Nigerian economy trying to attract huge entities, huge corporations, big manufacturing entities, especially. And we left our trading services alone, especially when it comes to tech, when it comes to startups, and all these unicorns that had to register in other jurisdictions. And most of the part of the reason why they reside in other jurisdiction is because of the stability in the laws and the certainty of it. Like when I register in Delaware, I usually know what I'm getting, as against when you're registering in Nigeria in the past. So what we've done now is to ensure that there are several laws or regulations that actually makes you confident and comfortable that at every point, you're not just your funding is safe, but your revenue is also safe, and you can repatriate at any point and at any time. Like we've gone beyond where we wanted to just retain funds in Nigeria as a means to assume we have stability. No, what we need to now do is allow the free flow of funds, allow you repatriate at any point, but create an enabling environment that ensures that you would not even want to exit the Nigerian market. We have the ISA that was recently signed. Is also a way to give confidence to investors. Now we have where Itana is also operating from, and under the regulation Itana is operating, which is the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Act. Now, what the act has done is giving incentives, especially administrative and tax incentives to investors, allowing you to come in, register in Nigeria, and be eligible to all these incentives, which also helps you to scale not just within Nigeria, but outside Nigeria. So because we are talking about Itana now, and we are referring to the special economic zone being this best destination for these investors or for these startups, and or when you come trading services especially, I'll be referring mostly to the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Act. Now we have other regulations that have come in place that as towards ease of doing business and towards ensuring we get investor confidence. But the best amongst them, which we can still take advantage of, is the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Act, because it does not just gives you a platform, it also provides the avenue where you can not just register a business seamlessly, but also helps your business to seamlessly grow. And part of the benefits is that you have a seamless administrative procedure. One, you do not need to get expatriate quota when you're bringing in your expats. You can easily bring in your funds. into any Nigerian bank, and it will be recognized as funds meant for the special economic zone, which means you can domicile those funds in whatever currency of your choice, and you can leave those funds in whatever currency of your choice. It also makes it easier for you to repatriate your funds, because then you're not considering, or you're not having to consider the current continuous devaluation in the currency. There are other benefits which goes to customs, taxes, and several other benefits which I believe we might still address. But I believe the NEPS Act has created a platform, and because the president recently gazetted the tariffs when it comes to trading for the AFTA protocols, that has also given a lot of confidence, because everybody is talking about it. Yes, that means Nigeria is really very serious about implementing the AFTA protocols, and we are very serious about implementing the trading services protocol of the Free Trade Continental Agreement.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tayo. And I think that's definitely I feel like people don't understand some of the changes and what's available. And you even mentioning Itana and all the incentives are available is something that if more people understood and knew what was aware, they would understand how it benefits their businesses as well. There's something that Edmond has put in here, and I think it speaks to after that you mentioned. He said, would you say if we want our markets to be globally reputable, we should ensure incorporation on the continent with a jurisdiction with solid tax treaties? He's talking about continent-wide at this point. If you look at Africa as a market, even though we say Africa is not a country, but if you look at Africa as a market, what needs to happen? What do you imagine that needs to happen for Africa to be better positioned in general as a great place for businesses to operate and be domiciled in? I don't know who wants to take this question. Kelechi, I feel like I should direct it to you.
Yeah, so is it a question about the treaties?
Yes, yes, yes.
So I'm trying to understand the question. So the person asking, if you want our markets to be globally reputed, we should ensure incorporation on the continent with a jurisdiction with solid tax treaties. So I do not really think that it's solely a tax issue. You know, when you're talking about treaties, or unless if the person is speaking to other kinds of treaties, but I think the question is more around tax treaties. Tax is just one factor when you're considering the viability of a jurisdiction for incorporation. It's a very important factor, but it's not everything that there is to the considerations when you're trying to incorporate an entity. Of course, people want to save money from taxes, but like I said in the first, when I was responding to the first question, I think there are a lot of other things. It's more like a macroeconomic issue, and also like a doing business issue. So investors need to be comfortable with investing in startups in a particular jurisdiction, and it goes beyond tax savings. It goes to things like predictability of legal outcomes, where you're sure that when there's a dispute, that you can almost infer from judicial precedent, that's decisions of courts in previous cases, what the outcome would be. That there's standardization of procedure, where if you're dealing with a regulator, you know what the process is. It's not like a case where investors put in money today and tomorrow the government just wakes up and changes the rules and it affects everyone. You know, like we've seen examples where local regulation could literally kill an entire business. You know, and you talk about the ease of repatriating funds. Nigeria have been dealing with liquidity issues for foreign exchange. So investors bring in money, they invest in USD and you convert it to Naira. And then when you want to repatriate the funds, they can't find USD to buy anymore. And then even when they eventually find USD to buy, it's at a very exorbitant interest rate. So maybe they invested when dollar was 500 Naira when Naira was 700 Naira to a dollar. And at the time they're trying to exit, dollar is like 1,500. That already has, so those uncertainties makes the environment very unpredictable. And the government has a lot to do with this. Tax incentive is one of those things. And of course, yes, to answer the question, it helps to have a very wide treaty network. So which is why, that's one of the reasons why Mauritius is very attractive. Mauritius has almost 50 double tax treaties and I think it's one of the country in Africa with the most tax treaties with other countries, other continents like Europe and America. So it helps for African governments to negotiate more tax treaties with other the governments in other jurisdictions to minimize tax exposure. But that's just one thing. It's more around most of the things that I have spoken about. And I think that, again, I spoke about the capital markets aspect as well. People want to exit. There has to be there has to be, a route to IPO in Africa, in Nigeria, for instance. So when those things are not in place, having a wide treaty network alone wouldn't be enough reason to attract the domiciliation of corporate structures in Africa. Because the issue is not that people are not investing in African startups. That's not the problem. It is that they want to invest through an offshore vehicle. So rather than bring the money directly into a Nigerian startup, they want to put the money in a Delaware startup that has the shareholding as a holding company to a Nigerian startup. So they are still investing, but because of those other issues I have mentioned before, they would rather immune themselves from those issues by putting their money at the offshore level rather than diluting it when they bring it into Nigeria. And so I think when those issues are solved, investors' confidence would be renewed, and we can have investors invest directly into local African-based startups.
I think you said it really well. At first, you said you didn't understand the question, but I thought you answered it really well. And even Ray layered on, and he said that treaties are not guaranteed now. We have a war going on against BRICS countries and countries friendly to them, which is true. And there's another comment here that I wanted to take from Abdul Golden. He said, from the perspective of a professional investor, he's not comfortable with investing in a company if the parent company is not domiciled in the US. He's trying to minimize tax and accounting complexity as well, much more convenient movement of the funds. And I imagine that there are lots of investors that have that same sentiment where it's my money. And if you want my money, you need to make me feel comfortable. And I want to, do you imagine that this would change over time? Like, what needs to happen for investors to feel more comfortable and more confident to invest in local startups? I think you've touched on it a bit. Tayo, do you want to also touch on it a bit? What needs to happen for investors to be more comfortable in investing in companies that are truly like African and domiciled here?
It will take time, and we are not oblivious to that. But we need to start, and that's why we are starting now. And someone mentioned that yes, treaties are not everything. We have all the trade wars going on. Luckily, Africa is still one of the continents that has really not dabbled or fully involved in all the trade wars. We are like the third man in the whole mix, where
The observer.
most times, yes, the observer, where most times most of your investments are still so safe in Africa because you can still easily access so many other continents from Africa. Yes, I agree that security of your investment, not just even your investment, security of your entity itself, and you don't want so much complexities. That is one of the reasons why Itana has come on board, to ensure that we can bring the money back home. We understand what the issues are, and every day for every step we are taking, we are trying to make sure we eliminate those issues. It might not be immediate, but we still have a lot of startups that have their parent company in the US, but have their subsidiaries in Nigeria, especially in the free zone, in special economic zone. But we've seen so many of them that because of the uncertainties going on now, are rather moving their parent companies to Nigeria. Now, what we are offering is an alternative to the regular way of doing business, an alternative to a system where you feel you must necessarily move your entire establishment into the Nigerian system and carry on day-to-day business by being physically present. What we are offering is an alternative where you can register your company from anywhere and operate from anywhere in the world. and we need to take it a step at a time. Delaware, other parts of Africa, even Estonia, they did not start just one day. They started by gradual steps. And we are at that point in Nigeria. We have the laws and we are improving on the laws every day. What we've said is, even within the special economic zone, we have tested it with physical companies. We've tested it with manufacturing companies, and it has worked. Ease of doing business, ease of capital repatriation. When you bring in your funds, you are not, there's no insistence that you have to convert those funds to the local currency. You can keep your capital in the currency of entry into the African market. So with all those steps, we have ensured that we have helped you hedge against any expected devaluation in the currency. Your bank account is one that has no anti-dollarization policy attached to it because you're a special economic zone entity. So with those steps, we are making sure that we are giving you those comforts. Now, the policy part of it. The other policy part of it is that the government at no point will take over your business, which is some of the fears that people raise. Will the government take over my business? That doesn't even happen. So with that flexibility in your operations, flexibility in your registration protocol, and flexibility in your compliance protocol. Compliance checks are clear. You can carry out your compliance from anywhere, and you can even carry out your compliance digitally because we have the INEBSA app, that is a platform that is being rolled out fully. That makes it easy for you to monitor your business and have ease of doing business all around. So those are the things. It's a comfort, right? We are starting. We've seen companies starting to move their parent companies to Nigeria. We are going to see more. And what we are trying to also tell everybody is there is confidence in the Nigerian market. Once we can prove confidence in the Nigerian market, we've seen other African countries trying to come back to Itana to learn from what we are doing. We've seen African companies coming to us to collaborate to ensure that, yes, Africa is not a country, but Africa can be a big super market platform where every ease of doing business is and comfort is the regular principle when you are trying to come into the African market.
Brilliant. I think that definitely answers that. And there's a question here from Edmond, and I think he sent it in. I actually saw it when he sent it in. He asks, what structuring approaches would you recommend for founders looking to layer in holding companies or trusts to optimize for scale, compliance, and investor alignment across multiple African markets? So I'll hand this up to Anu. I think it's an amazing question because some people don't even understand the ways they can structure their companies, right? Tayo had mentioned some people will have their holding company in Delaware and then have subsidiaries locally. Like there are different ways that you can structure your business to better optimize it. So Anu, I hand that off to you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. So in terms of when structuring your holding companies or you're looking to layer in or include like a trust structure as founders, I think it's very important that you understand what your strategic goals are, right? And then if the goal is to probably exit in a certain country, then it will make sense that your old co is set up in that country. For instance, if you're targeting a US exit, you want to be able to list on the US stock exchange, then in that instance, you would then want to set up your old co in the US, and you have your opco, your operating company here in Nigeria in the Itana zone, right? And they can then either license IP from the old co structure to the opco. Also, you can set up a trust essentially for your founder's equity, because that I think that's very important so that to prevent dilution once you have more shareholders coming into the company. So you can set up a trust. Mauritius is quite good for trust as well. Trust structure, they have several administrators in Mauritius that advise clients on how to structure set up trust, estate planning. So that's something that founders can look into to essentially have a trust that hold this founders shares in the old co. In that way, you can create a level of protection against any dilutions that might come up because you have other investors coming into the company. In terms of compliance, it's important to also be aware of what are the regulatory things that you will need to do if you have several companies in different jurisdictions, because each jurisdiction has the regulatory compliance, right? In Delaware, you have all of your tax filings, your reporting filings with the US, with their own SEC as well, and the securities law in Nigeria. You also would have several filings with the CAC, with the National Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, like the NIPC, the Federal Ministry of Interior as well, and also like our tax reporting agencies like the FIRS. So in terms of compliance, having various companies set up in different jurisdictions, it would be good, it would be helpful that in your compliance requirements are kind of streamlined, so you know what's required for this entity that is set up in the US, you know what's required for this entity set up in Nigeria. And if you then have all of your companies set up in a particular region, for instance, Africa, there's some similarities, right, in the compliance requirements. So that might be easier to navigate than having your OPCO and OldCo in different separate jurisdictions. So there's no one answer to what structure and approaches you should consider, because each structure is unique to your business and what you want to do in the various markets. Like, what markets are you also targeting? That would also determine what approach you would take. If you're going to be targeting Nigerian markets, your operational capabilities are here, you're only looking to target Nigerian investors or local investors, or supply Nigerian or African customers, it will make sense that your entire operation, while either the OPCO or OldCo is set up in Africa, there will be no need to then have an OldCo structure in Delaware if you're not going to end up doing anything in the US market, because that just creates extra layer of compliance and also taxes that is not necessary, because your business doesn't even have anything to do with the US market. Like I mentioned before, the rush to set up in Delaware without fully considering whether or not you're actually going to do business in the US is one of the reasons why a lot of African startups, are now changing their old codes to Africa, because they realize, okay, I've set up an old code in Delaware. Yes, I have one or two investors, but I'm not catering to the US market at all. And now I have bills upon bills of taxes to pay in dollars, and I'm not even generating dollar income. So at the end of the day, you realize that you've made a decision, you've gotten maybe one or two investors, but the losses you've accumulated are way more than whatever money came in from those investors. And then you see them trying to restructure back to Nigeria or another African country. So when making structuring decisions, it's very important that you understand all of the things that play into making those decisions. Like I mentioned, your regulatory compliance, tax requirements, what's my target market? Am I actually going to generate dollar income? Do I intend to cater to a US market or whatever country or foreign country that I want to set up in? If you're not going to cater to that market, then it wouldn't make sense to then set up an entity in that market as well. So yeah, I think that's the question.
I think that's brilliant. The fact that you started with, it depends on what your objective is, because some people don't even know their objective is. They just follow what they see other people do. And like you said, there's so many companies that actually started out registering in Delaware because they just thought, that's where I needed to be. And then later on discovered the complexity of that decision. And like you said, all the bills that they accumulated from doing that. So yes, it just depends on your objective. And the good thing is that the guys from Udoma, Bello-Osagie, they can help you with thinking through even how you structure. So you have the best online right now. There's a question from Alex, and I love all the comments that are going in the comment section. So please, you can also read some of them and put in more questions, put in more comments. There's a question from Alex Asedu. He said one of the structural challenges investors face is the absence of flexible vehicles like limited liability partnerships in many African markets. This makes it harder to pool funds or structure local investment efficiently without defaulting to offshore entities. Are there any active conversation or reforms on the way to modernize these corporate frameworks on the continent, especially in light of initiatives like the AFTA agreement? I'll give this to Kelechi.
Thank you, Kichi, and thanks to Alex for that question. I had attempted to respond to him. So to start with, Nigeria does have provision for an entity for corporate venues to be registered as limited liability partnerships. Um, but I have to say, sadly, that it doesn't confer the benefit. So I understand where Alex might be coming from in terms of LLP. So in other jurisdictions, limited liability partnerships are treated like partnerships, but with corporate personality, where it's seen as a pass-through. So if you had an LLP, an investor, for instance, would be like a limited partner in that structure. And their liability will be limited, and then taxation would happen at the level of the investor. So it's usually very beneficial for tax purposes. So, for instance, if the LLP invests or generates income, the tax treatment would usually be that in other jurisdiction, the shareholders in the company or the LLP, which has a corporate structure, would be taxed individually in their various jurisdictions, so it's passed through. But in Nigeria, it's not like that. So if you're an LLP, you have a corporate personality, and it means that you're treated as a company. So any income that you generate as an operating LLP is taxed first as company's income tax, and then the distributions to the shareholders in the LLP, which would include the investors and the owners of the company, would then be taxed again at that level when they're distributing dividends to the investor and to the owners at a withholding tax rate of 10%. So that creates like what seems like what is actually a double layer of taxation. So yes, to answer Alex's questions, other African jurisdictions, I can speak for Nigeria, have considered the LLP structure, but in terms of how the tax authorities are interpreting the rules, it doesn't make it very attractive. It does help in limiting liability and allowing for corporate personality to hold assets in the name of the LLP, unlike LPs that cannot do that. But in terms of the tax treatment, which is actually one of the core benefits, that's lacking. But I think that I'd like to defer to what Tayo said. The benefit of setting up in a free trade, in a free zone entity like what Itana is offering, would then deal with all of these tax issues that I have spoken about, because there's exemption from corporate tax, there's exemption from capital gains tax, there's exemption from withholding tax on dividends and all of that. So if you were to invest in Nigeria, it would make sense to go through to have a holding company in a free trade zone that then deals with most of the tax issues that an LLP structure in Nigeria would not help you avoid. So yeah, I think that's like the response that I can give.
Awesome. I think that really answered it, Alex. Unless there's a follow-on question that you have, but I think that it's a bit of a complex question, but I think that really does answer it. There's another question here from Olayemika Ayebanji. And what I like about these questions is that you can see that a lot of these people have done some earlier research. So they're coming with very insightful questions that shows that they've done some thinking around this. Now, Olayemika is asking, I have a question on repatriation. I think I'm going to send it straight to Tayo. Said, I read that there are no double taxation treaties between Nigeria and the US, but don't you think that the 10% CGT on repatriated capital is too high? I'm being laid back by it. The exception says I have to reinvest it or a portion of it in a Nigerian company, but I will still have a huge tax exposure if I don't.
Okay. So currently, Nigeria is amending its tax laws. We have a tax bill that is being reviewed and is being sent back and forth presently. So there has been a lot of engagements on it because also made representation to the government when it comes to what other jurisdictions are doing and the best approach for Nigeria, especially when it comes to global taxation and the way you treat entities, or especially foreign entities operating in Nigeria and having to repatriate their funds. So what we are doing now is waiting for the amended wordings to the tax bill, which is still being reviewed. So there are so many questions that we might not be able to answer on the general taxation within Nigeria. Within the zone, what we've had so far is an exemption from corporate taxes. But based on the global tax system in Nigeria, I think it is better to wait for the finalized wordings of the draft tax bill. I think that's better. But I know a lot of these things are being taken into consideration, especially for jurisdictions that do not have the double taxation agreements or treaties. Maybe like when you take your funds back to a jurisdiction like the US, and you still considered based on the maximum taxation that you should have paid, and there's a review or reevaluation of your entire company revenue to determine what the US taxes will have been. So let's wait for the amended wordings. Then it is easier to even have a business advisory session with you on the best way to scale. But from our experience and what we know, the zone, the special economic zone, or the free zone, as you may call it, still acts as the best investment haven in Nigeria.
Awesome. And I think this is also even a follow on. Like you said, there's some changes that are happening, and which is part of what we said when this session started. Nigeria and Africa, even Africa as a continent, it has evolved and grown over the years, trying to create a more favorable environment for businesses. So even with the tax bill, with the new reforms that are happening, is all designed to be able to, one, give investor more confidence and provide a more enabling environment for businesses. There's a question or is a comment that I saw here. I've been trying to find it, and I forget, I can't remember, but the person had commented and said that when it comes to deciding where a company is domiciled, isn't most of the power with the investor as opposed to the startup? I don't know who asked it, and I don't know why I can't find it anymore. But I did see that, and I wanted to get a comment on that. So I know I want you to actually comment on that. Who gets to decide where the company is domiciled? What are the deciding factors? Because this person believes that it's the investor that gets to say it has to be here. So who is the decider?
I mean, the typical factors, whoever is giving you money, right? that kind of that pulls the strings. But I would always say that startups also have leverage. They have leverage in different ways. So you might not have economic leverage like the money because you need funding, but you're able to say, "This is my evaluation. This is what I bring to the table. This is what you're going to get in 2-3 years when you exit." Now, the reason why the investors are giving you money is because they want to get returns on that money. So if you provide information that guarantees that they're going to get returns, they will typically lean towards what you're suggesting. So you're saying, okay, this is where my OPCO is located, and we're targeting local market. This is how much revenue we intend to generate. And if we then have to set up here, these are the challenges we're going to face. Now, if the investor is willing to support you in overcoming those challenges, then maybe you can at least go with your investor. But I always say that startups still have a voice. I get it that you're looking for funding, you want money. It seems like you're in a tight corner and you don't have any say in there's no bargaining power, but there's always bargaining power. There's something that the investor also wants, which is the fact that they see that your company is headed somewhere. They see promise, they see the returns that they're about to make by investing in your company. So there's always room to negotiate. You just have to sell that jurisdiction that you think is better for you to them, and also compromise. They're always going to compromise. You're saying, okay, I understand that you want me to set up in this jurisdiction. However, I'm going to need help with regulatory legal compliance. Are you willing to recommend or pay legal tax consultants to ensure that when I set up in this jurisdiction, then I'm not going to be committing any laws that would then affect revenues to be made. So you can always bring up compromising suggestions or ask, okay, can we do this? Can we do that? Are you able to support us? Because for most of these startups that we've advised, right, once an investor comes in, they'll typically then retain us to be the legal counsel. And there's the investor doing that because the startup cannot afford to do that, to ensure that they are legally compliant, tax compliant, right? The investors typically hire consultants for that startup. So it's also something that you can bring up to your investors. Okay, I understand you want me to be in this jurisdiction, but are you willing to pay the cost of me being in this jurisdiction, so you don't enter into a jurisdiction and then you're stuck with all of the bills and all of the penalties that have been levied against you because you just were not aware of your obligations in that jurisdiction. So I always say that startups can bargain. You just need to find your voice and play on the fact, the advantages that you also can give to the investor. That's how I would approach that.
Yeah, and maybe
Very
in Kichi,
true.
let me just add to what Anu has said. I
Yes.
mean, I agree with her completely. And just to add to that is Nigeria recently had enacted, I think in 2022, Startup Act that confers lots of benefits to startups in Nigeria. And I do not think that a lot of startups are taking advantage of those benefits. And because, like Anu said, you need to find your competitive advantage. Investors want to get their money back. They want to, and if possible, tax-free, and if you can show to them that there are a lot of benefits in investing here in Nigeria, preferably through the FTZ holdco, the free trade zone holdco structure, but the entity domiciled here, you could actually get them to reconsider their stance on getting you to incorporate outside. Do you see? So I think that just to support Anu said, startups should look at the Startup Act and the benefits that are coming with the new tax bill, Nigerian tax bill, and sort of speak to professionals as well, like Anu and myself and, Itana, on how they can structure their operation so that they are operationally optimal, tax efficient, and, financially viable. I think they will be able to attract investors locally without having to go offshore.
Brilliant.
Oh,
And okay, Tara, you want to?
yeah. So, what are investors looking for? They want security for their funds. It's just simple. Some investors are not even looking for huge returns immediately, but they want security for those funds. And a lot of startups, when they are looking for funding, they are always in a hurry. And well, it could be because there's no funding to do enough research or to retain the right expertise. But then we also owe it to both the startups and the investors to create the right environment. So it will be easy when the startups go to the investors to even pitch investing in the Nigerian market. And that is what we are doing. That is what we will continue to do. That confidence in the Nigerian market, we will continue to build it, especially when it comes to trade in services. When it comes to startups, we will continue to build that confidence in the Nigerian market. So it's just going to be, it will become the rule of thumb. Now, where do you invest? It is Nigeria. It is in the special economic zone.
And I can't wait for that. And I think I just want to double click on what has been said is as founders, you need to know what's available to you. Kelechi mentioned the Startup Act, and it's true. Like there's so many, if you don't know, then um you can't move with confidence. You just move wherever you're told to move. So it's really important that you educate yourself. And that's why we also do these sessions. Because once you have information, then you're better able to position your business. So it's really important. We're going to take the last question because we're almost at time. And I think it's an important question from Bashangai. I hope I didn't destroy the name. It's a very nice name. He said, as a South African entrepreneur with entities registered in Delaware and Europe, so he has multi-registration now, can you speak to advantages of registering a new or existing company in Nigeria versus South Africa or Rwanda? And I think it's interesting because we see companies that have multiple registration in different countries, and some that begin to even move from one jurisdiction to another. So now he's trying to look at Nigeria versus South Africa or Rwanda. And then I also want you to talk about companies that are looking to move from one jurisdiction to another, what that would also look like for them. I feel like I want to direct this to Kelechi.
Um, Thank you for that question, Bashangani. To be honest, I think a lot of it depends. I'm just trying to make sure that I give a measured response. A lot of it depends on the market that you're looking at. So um, when you consider that Nigeria has a very huge market for goods and services, and it's a big market. No, I mean, there's Africa and there's Nigeria. Nigeria is a very big market. People are looking to sell here. If you wanted to provide services that are targeted at, Nigerians or Africans at large, I think it's a lot of it is commercially driven, but from a legal perspective, it would be helpful to consider as a tax lawyer. Let me speak to the tax issue. So Nigeria has something called the significant economic presence, regime. That means that if you're a digital business and you're providing services to people in Nigeria and you're not registered in Nigeria, you'll be deemed to have a taxable presence in Nigeria if you are from a country that doesn't have a double tax treaty with Nigeria. So let's say you're a US company registered in the US, your IP is in the US, but you're providing services to people in Nigeria. You're going to create a tax presence in Nigeria. And what that does is that you'll be able to tax in two jurisdictions. You pay tax in the US and you pay tax in Nigeria. And that's not a good place to be. So in terms of whether you should set up in Nigeria, it would depend a lot on where your market is. Like we've said all through the call, if you're looking to serve the US market, which is less, in most cases for African startups, they're not looking to serve the US market. They're looking to serve the African market. If you're looking to serve the African market and in extension Nigeria, you should actually incorporate in Nigeria for the benefits that I've mentioned, that you won't be liable to multiple layers of taxes. Nigeria also has a good treaty network, with other countries. So for instance, they have treaties with like about 16 countries, including China, including Singapore, South Africa, of course, Philippines, and a lot of other countries, the UK, Canada, including Canada. So the fact that you are a Nigerian business set up in Nigeria with treaty networks across various jurisdictions also confers lots of benefits because you won't be liable to tax in those jurisdictions. So you could serve those people, or you'll be keeping your money in Nigeria and pay taxes mostly in Nigeria. That's from the tax perspective. The other aspects that of it is like Tayo has mentioned. I think the summary of what we are trying to talk about in this session is that the free trade zone is a good place for digital businesses because from there you can actually provide services because it encourages export. You can provide services to Nigeria and most other countries of the world without exposing yourself to financial risk, tax risk, and lots of operational risk. And I think that the solution that Itana is presenting is a good one that should be considered. So, of course, for your business, you need to look at. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So you need to consider what kind of product or services you're providing, your primary market, your growth market, and that would also, and the kind of investors you're bringing. If your investors are mostly from Europe, it's better than if you're coming from America, for instance. So those considerations would help you determine whether to set up in Nigeria. But in summary, Nigeria has really grown in terms of our economic environment to accept investment. We've seen a lot of reforms that have happened even in our financial sector. The CBN has rolled out lots of measures to keep the exchange rate very stable. There are lots of other reforms that are going on, and investors should consider looking at Nigeria a lot more carefully, and even business people looking to serve the African market.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are at time, and
Nkechi, I know we have
yes,
time, and I'll just state this quickly. I know Kelechi has mentioned the tax administration, which is very important, and because you having your entity registered in Itana would also help you for better tax administration, especially when you're serving the Nigerian market. You would not be liable to final taxes, because if you are even ever liable to any form of taxes based on your the type of business you are carrying out, then you could always just still have your tax filings, and it will be taken into consideration based on actual profit, not just on the initial revenue that you had received. But outside that, it now also affords you flexibility. So rather than registering in other African jurisdictions, registering in Itana allows you to and makes it easier for you to operate your businesses, because you can make use of the BPO services, other type of services, under the after trading services protocol that allows you where if you were registered in Itana, not being physically present in Itana, but still having your staff within Nigeria or any other country of your choice. So the flexibility is actually top notch, and we are the only country that's offering this type of flexibility in the entirety of Africa.
absolutely. I think that's very important to note. And like you said, a lot of countries are trying to learn from what Titana is doing. Some even see it as a, a test bed for the after agreement and how that would scale. So it's really important. We are at time, and I'm truly grateful for everyone for being here. I'm going to give the speakers 30 seconds, final comments. Anu, Kelechi, Tayo, we'll go in that order. 30 seconds, final comments, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, so final comments, just for founders and investors to know that Africa is not a place you should run away from, right? There's so many opportunities, especially in Nigeria. Itana is doing a very, very good thing, right? So please consider or take into consideration lots more things rather than just running to the nearest foreign country to set up without taking into consideration all of the legal compliance requirements, tax requirements as well. There's so many benefits setting up in Africa and Nigeria. We have tax benefits, incentives, and also security for funds and repatriation as well. So there's nothing to be afraid of in Africa. So that'll be my key takeaway.
Kelechi?
Okay. I guess my final comments would be it's addressed to those on the call and those who will be watching after who write checks to African founders from Nigeria, within Africa. I'd like to encourage them to also encourage more African startups to remain in Africa, because the quest to go to Delaware has always been because we're bringing in foreign capital. But if we have local capital, the local capital funder, the funders should encourage more localization and domiciliation, and also encourage the use of the free trade, the digital free trade zones like we talked about on the call. So the way Delaware was popularized, we should also think of popularizing other African jurisdictions as, go-to places for holdco structures.
Awesome. Tayo?
Yes, so I will. Okay, so for Itana, what we do is we just don't register you. We make sure we are part of your business growth. That's one of the reasons we're having this session with Udoma, because we also bring you closer to the experts that you need when you're trying to scale or expand into the African or Nigerian market. So what I'll do is I'll just layer on what Anu and Kelechi have mentioned and ask, when are you coming to Itana? Because we are ready to receive you. We have the platform and we have the market to receive you. And lastly, I'll end by saying it's time to bring the money back home. Africa's time is now. Let's bring the money back home. Thank you.
Yes, Africa is now. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt, but definitely Africa is definitely now. Thank you so much. to our amazing speakers. It's been great having you and everyone who joined in. People say from beginning to end. I'm so grateful. Thank you for joining us. I hope it's been super insightful for you and has gotten you to think critically about your business jurisdiction. It's no joke. This is like a huge foundational aspect of your business. Thank you to our guests for taking the time to share your knowledge and your insight. It's been truly impactful. Shout out to our partners, Udoma and Bello-Osagie. It's great that we got to do this together. And remember to get on the app.itana.africa, where you can set up your business in the free zone today. Until next time, keep building, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.